There are schools where you learn mathematics. And then there are schools where you learn something far more important. How to survive. Black Veil High School sat at the edge of the city like a scar. Old stone walls, windows that never let enough light in, a gate that opened slowly and closed the same way. Like it was deciding whether to let you in. Like it was deciding whether to let you out. Students who transferred here came from other schools, other cities, other lives, and every single one of them went quiet within the first week. Not the quiet of someone who has found peace. The quiet of someone who has understood something they cannot unlearn. The black car stopped in front of the gate at exactly 7:53 in the morning. The door opened. Seo Jin-woo stepped out. No luggage. No phone in his hand. No expression on his face that could be read as nervousness or excitement or any of the things a person is supposed to feel walking into a new school for the first time. He stood on the pavement for exactly 1 second, looked at the gate and walked forward. The gate opened. He didn't slow down to watch it. He walked through like he had already decided the gate was going to open before it did. Behind him, 2 students at the entrance whispered without looking at each other. "That's the transfer? Don't go near him. New students here don't stay normal for long." The gate closed behind Jin-woo. Slowly. Completely. Like something locking into place. Inside, the hallways were the kind of quiet that feels wrong. Not empty. There were students everywhere, moving between classes, standing near lockers. But the noise level was wrong for the number of people. Too controlled. Too careful. Like everyone had independently decided that being too loud was a risk they weren't willing to take. The teacher at the front of the classroom looked slightly nervous when she introduced him. "This is Seo Jin-woo. New transfer student. Please make him feel welcome." Nobody applauded. Nobody smiled. Nobody said a word. Jin-woo walked to the back row and sat down. He didn't look at the board. He looked at the students, slowly, methodically, taking in the room the way someone takes in a map, not for aesthetics but for information. And within 2 minutes he noticed it. Every single student in the classroom had a small black mark on their left wrist. Same position. Same symbol. The lines were too precise to be accidental, too uniform to be individual choices. He looked at the student beside him. Same mark. The student in front. Same mark. He looked down at his own bare wrist. He was the only one without it. Lunch came and the hallway outside the cafeteria emptied faster than it should have. Jin-woo walked through it alone, footsteps the only sound, and he registered the emptiness the way you register something before you understand why it matters. Then 3 students stepped out from the corridor junction ahead. They moved the way people move when they are completely certain of the outcome. Relaxed shoulders. Slight smiles. No rush. The one in the center was a step ahead of the other 2, taller, sharper eyes, wearing his uniform with the collar open in a way that said he had decided rules applied to other people. Jang Tae-yong. He looked at Jin-woo the way a person looks at something that has walked into the wrong room and hasn't realized it yet. "You're new," he said. "So I'll explain things once." He took 1 step forward. "This hallway belongs to us." Jin-woo looked at him. Then looked past him at the students further down the corridor, watching, completely still, not one of them moving to leave or intervene. He looked at the camera mounted near the ceiling, its red light blinking steadily. He looked back at Tae-yong. "Belongs to students?" he said. Tae-yong smiled. The kind of smile that has no warmth anywhere inside it. "No. To the ones who survive longer." He pushed Jin-woo's shoulder. Not hard enough to be a fight. Hard enough to be a test. Jin-woo didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't tense. He reached up with one hand and wrapped his fingers around Tae-yong's wrist. Not grabbing, not twisting. Just holding. With the exact amount of pressure that communicates without any room for misinterpretation. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Tae-yong's smile disappeared. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't feel like a reaction. It felt like something had been assessed and responded to in a language he hadn't known anyone else here spoke. Jin-woo released his wrist. "You're not actually in control," Jin-woo said quietly. "You're assigned." Silence. For the first time in longer than the watching students could remember, Jang Tae-yong took a step back. Not out of fear. Out of something that lives underneath fear, that instinct the body has when it senses something it cannot calculate. Then the bell rang. Except it didn't sound like a bell. It sounded like a frequency, something that moved through the walls and the floor and the air simultaneously, something designed not to signal time but to signal compliance. Every student in the hallway stopped mid-movement. Mid-sentence. Mid-breath. A speaker above crackled to life. The voice that came through it was flat. Artificial. The kind of voice that has never belonged to a human being. District Assembly. 10 minutes. And then every student in the hallway began moving. Same direction. Same pace. No talking. No questions. Like a current had switched on and they were all part of it. Jin-woo stood still and watched them move around him, and the thing that settled in his chest was not confusion. It was recognition. This wasn't chaos pretending to be a school. This was a system. Perfectly designed. Carefully maintained. And so deeply embedded into everyone around him that they didn't even feel it anymore. The way you stop feeling the weight of something you've been carrying long enough. He followed. The assembly hall was underground. The staircase leading down to it had no windows, no lighting except for strips along the floor, and by the time Jin-woo reached the bottom the air felt different, heavier, like the weight of everything above was being held up by whatever happened in this room. The walls were bare concrete. The lighting was red and dim, the kind of light that makes everyone look like a different version of themselves. 3 groups were already positioned at separate ends of the hall. The first group moved with physical authority, wide stances, eyes that evaluated every person in the room as a potential obstacle. Their leader stood at the front. Jang Tae-yong, who had recovered his expression by now and wore it like armor. The second group was quieter but more precise. Expensive uniforms worn correctly. The kind of stillness that comes not from peace but from the absolute confidence of someone who has never had to raise their voice to get what they want. Their leader, Choi Min-jae, stood with both hands in his pockets, watching the room with eyes that were calculating something. The third group barely moved at all. They stood at the darkest end of the hall and the light didn't quite reach them fully, which Jin-woo understood immediately was not an accident. Their leader, Han Jae-kyung, was seated on a concrete ledge with his arms crossed, looking at the floor, but the attention he was paying to the room was visible in the way nothing about his posture was actually relaxed. Jin-woo walked in last. Every head turned simultaneously. The shift in the room was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the shift that happens when something enters a space that the space was not designed to accommodate, a variable the equation had not accounted for. All 3 leaders felt it at the same time, and none of them liked it and none of them showed that in the same way. Choi Min-jae spoke first. Cold smile, warm tone, the combination that always means the opposite of what it sounds like. This room is not for visitors. Jin-woo took one step forward. Then why does it let me in? Silence. Real silence. Not the controlled kind from the hallways but the kind that falls when something unexpected has happened and every person in the room is simultaneously deciding how to respond to it. Han Jae-kyung stood up slowly from the ledge. He was not the tallest person in the room but something about the way he moved made the room smaller. You shouldn't exist here, he said. Jin-woo looked at all 3 of them. One after another. Unhurried. I'm just a student, he said. Pause. Long enough to mean something. Then quietly, for now. The lights went out. Not dimmed, cut. The entire hall dropped into complete darkness for 1 second that felt much longer, and then the screens mounted across the concrete walls flickered on simultaneously. Static first. Then a single frequency of sound, not music, not a voice, something between both of them, something that made the air feel like it was vibrating. Then the voice. Not human. Not artificial in the way the speaker voice had been. Something else. Something that sounded like it was coming from inside the walls themselves, from inside the building's bones. Unregistered variable detected. All 3 district leaders tensed. Jang Tae-yong's jaw tightened. Choi Min-jae's hands came out of his pockets. Han Jae-kyung went completely still, which on him was different from his usual stillness, more like the stillness of something about to move very fast. Jin-woo looked up at the screen slowly. Black veil, he said quietly. To himself. To the room. To the voice. The system paused. 1 full second of silence. Then the screens changed. A file appeared across every display simultaneously. A name. A photograph. A status line beneath it. Seo Jin-woo. Status, erased. And then, while every person in the room watched, the status line changed. Status update, return confirmed. The sound that came after was not loud. It was a single tone, low and resonant, the kind that you feel in your sternum rather than hear with your ears. Heir protocol. Reactivated. The words moved through the room like a shockwave in slow motion. Jin-woo watched the 3 leaders process those 2 words and watched each of them arrive at the same place. A place none of them had prepared for, a scenario that the system they had built their entire power on had just classified as active. For the first time since he had stepped out of that car that morning, something moved across Jin-woo's face. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. Deep and quiet and cold, like something surfacing from very far down. He looked at the screen for a long moment. Then said softly, almost to himself, So I wasn't transferred. The room waited. I was returned. The screens went dark. The lights came back. And in the silence that followed, in a hall full of students who had built an entire world on the certainty that they understood how power worked in this school, not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. Because the system they had all been operating under, the system that had assigned them their districts and their ranks and their authority, had just announced something none of them had been told was possible. The heir was back. And none of them had known there was an heir.